Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Good Saturday to you all. Kyle Zander with you. It is Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I guess, Scott, you're here with us as well.
Absolutely.
How's it going?
It's going really well, and good luck to all the deer hunters that are out there this
Yes.
morning. I was telling Ron Lutz here, he's my guest, and we'll introduce him in a second, that I had to crawl out of my deer stand to come in to do the show today. So
You did.
Absolutely.
Was that tough for you? I'm
Well,
assuming it might have been.
The morning was a gorgeous morning, but as you just said in the broadcast, the wind is starting to pick up pretty substantially here today. And then you're in a deer stand, even when it's nice weather, that wind can cut right through you. But good luck to all the deer hunters. I know there's something like 200,000 deer hunters out in stands here today, so they're probably not listening to us, but their family members at home are, and they're anticipating that call. That's what they do. They sit home and anticipate that call and say, honey, I just got myself a nice deer. So hopefully now things have changed with technology. They'll probably take a photo with their telephone and send it to them on a text message.
Yeah, there you go.
I already got one this morning because my nephew is hunting with me, already bagged his first deer. So
Good for him.
first deer of his life, so it's pretty exciting this morning.
We talked about it with the wind. Are you ready for this new fall weather that's making its way through?
Well, I heard you say the snow word.
Yes.
And of course, owning an orchard, that's something that we'd like to have delayed as long as possible.
Right.
Because we've still got some apples on the trees. Not many, but we've got some apples we need to pick. And we've got some folks from Second Harvest, and actually the National Honor Society kids are coming by on Sunday to do a little bit of picking for the local food shelves. So we want to get all that stuff done before we get any really cold weather. It can wait several weeks as far as I'm concerned.
What's on tap for today's show?
Well, I've got Ron Lutz from he's an advanced markets consultant. What does that mean? Well, and Ron, I'm going to have you tell us a little bit, but he's a really good guy. That's the main part here. And advanced markets, of course, are those things that are probably a little bit more technical and a little bit more, advanced in terms of the planning strategies. And he's going to walk us today. Our topic is planned giving, how to balance money and taxes to make a difference in the lives of others. So we're going to get into that in just a minute here. But as you know, we always talk a little bit about what happened in the market this week.
Right. It's been a couple tough, wild weeks, especially if you're invested in the financial markets. Scott, is there anything that people should do to help insulate themselves from some of this volatility?
Well, I may start to sound like a broken record on this one, but I
Perfectly fine.
totally believe in it. And I've been in the business 29 years, so there's a little bit of experience behind this belief. But, of course, we ended October on a very positive month. And, we had, I believe, 4 weeks in a row of positive market returns. And then November started out really bad. I mean, we're only a few days into it, but the first few days of November, the market, really took it.
Right.
And of course, now, again, we've had some recovery. But the whole point is that the markets are extremely volatile. They're all sitting on pins and needles on what's going on in Europe, and whether or not they're going to figure out how to bail out Greece. And, you hear interesting things like Sarkozy is making a phone call to China to get them to step in the deal and help support it. It's really a wild but international market that we're in, like it or not. And I encourage people constantly to get good diversification in their investments and make sure they have adequate defense, especially for whatever risk tolerance you have and whatever time frame you have towards your particular goal. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're younger and you're not going to be, let's say you're in your 30s and you don't have any need for your money real soon, like your kids are not approaching college and you're not looking towards retirement, the volatility probably isn't going to hurt you or affect you that much. On the other hand, if you're getting close to retirement, you had better get some defense in your portfolio. And the time to do it is when the market is really, in a position where you can make some particular adjustments. So obviously, when the Dow at its worst on March the 12th of 2009, if it wasn't the 12th, I'm within 3 days, was down to 6,500. Okay, now we bumped up through 12,000 this last week, came back down again a few points. But this is the time to make adjustments in the portfolio. This is the time to put defense into your portfolio, and there are more ways to do that than there ever have been. There are more methods of creating some risk mitigation is what I'll call it here. So if you don't know what they are, one of the things I encourage you to do to all our listeners is to make sure that they call their financial advisor, give one of the Thrivent representatives in your community a call, give me a call someone to get this assessment during this period of time so that you don't slide backwards. And of course, there's no guarantee when you're in equities that you're not going to get a backward slide anyway, but so that you start to manage those risks, and if you slide backwards, hopefully the strategy will keep you from sliding backwards as far. So if that's a risk for people, they really, really need to start paying attention right now. But that's a lot on the markets. I'm obviously a little excited about that.
That's
but
fine.
I do have Ron Lutz with us, and Ron, delighted to have you on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Scott. I'm excited to be here.
And you are an advanced markets consultant. That's a cool title, by the way. I like that. And I know that you do a lot in this arena of plan giving, and that is our topic today. One of the things, Ron, that we have used as a descriptor for our show in the past is what our president, Brad Hewitt, describes as the 5 S's. And of course, people start at that lowest level of financial existence is surviving. And those folks that are at that level of surviving, they really are living day to day. They're just trying to get through the moment because things are so rough. The next level up financially is struggling. And struggling really means you're living paycheck to paycheck. And in that environment, you can usually make your bills, but just barely. And after struggling, you get to stable. And a lot of folks would love to be stable today because they are in that struggling category, and it's our job, I believe, through the community and through our work with our individual clients is to try and help people get to stable and then on to the next one, which I really love, and that's secure. Because when you're stable, you start to have a 1-year time frame or longer. When you're secure, you typically have a time frame that, might be 2-3 years out. I mean, before the show, we were talking about you're having your youngest at Drake University and the costs of college, and boy, when you're stable, you start to look at, well, gosh, how can I plan for that in advance? And after you get to stable and secure, where you really have a longer time frame, the last one is surplus. And surplus is when you figured out that you've got most of what you need and you've got the reserves that you need, whether they're cash reserves or investment reserves, to provide for your retirement, to provide for your family, to provide for your daily living expenses. And that's when you really start to look at this issue of giving. Now, you and I both know that a lot of people at that secure part, before they get to surplus, are also looking at it, and that's fantastic. But here's the other thing. Very frankly, there's a lot of people that are secure, but they've not done enough of an analysis to even know it. I can't tell you the number of times I run people's numbers through and I say, yeah, you're because the big question, of course, as you're approaching retirement is how long will my money last? And we've got some tools that will give us a very accurate probability. We never know exactly what's going to happen, but certainly give us a probability on how long their money lasts. Well, if they get to the point where we can tell them, yep, it looks pretty good. It looks like your money's going to last you well through your 90s without any huge catastrophes going on, then they start to look at this whole issue of giving. So as people are getting this, at this point, Ron, tell us about the big categories of gifting that people might consider, and this whole concept or this whole term of planned giving. What is it?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, the biggest thing I think when you look at planned giving is people are looking past just what they're giving day to day. Excuse me. Well, excuse me. But more importantly is that they're looking at, okay, I've got some assets, farmland, I own a building, or I just have dollars in the market that I really don't need for my daily living. And so I'm looking at more than just what I'm giving on a weekly basis, an annual basis. And then in addition to that, how do we tie that into their estate planning?
Sure.
And also what charities do they want to give, and also how do they do it? Because there's different techniques that they can give to charity where there is actually an income coming back to them.
Right.
Or they're just going to give it for the purpose of getting a tax deduction today and maybe in over the next couple of years. Or maybe they do it again at death with the anticipation that they want to reduce the amount of estate tax that they might pay.
So basically, planned giving, although it could be a check, it's often not a check. It's something else.
Correct. It's usually an asset of some sort. Again, a stock, a bond, land, building, something to that effect.
Right. And so, it's a little harder to transfer. Obviously, a check's pretty easy to transfer. You just write it out, and here it is. And interestingly enough is that there's something in the neighborhood of between 2 and 8% of the world's wealth that is in cash. Okay, right. And so that leaves at least 92% of the world's wealth that is in something other than cash. And it's so interesting to me that we really, for most people, limit our giving thoughts to that somewhere between that 2 and 8%, because that's the way we've sort of been brought up, is that you would give out of, your cash reserves, and cash reserves are good, then you can give. But in fact, as you're really opening up the door for us here this morning, you can often give something other than cash. And one of the things we've talked about here in the past is sometimes it's very much out of the ordinary. So for instance, a particular situation with another advisor we talked about was a farmer who had very highly depreciated his machinery. Okay, so I don't know, I'm not saying the machinery was worth less, but on a tax basis, there was basically nothing left in it. So when they have the farm sale, of course, they're going to have to pay some tax on that gain, right? Right. Okay, so that might be something that they at least might consider if they're going to make a charitable contribution, is to say, why don't I give that old tractor and let the charity sell it? So there are a lot of different ways that a planned gift, whether it's, farmland, machinery, appreciated stocks, a lot of different things go into that category of a planned gift, don't they?
Yeah, in fact, we've even had farmers giving livestock and grain.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah. You can actually get it because it's an asset. They can give it away. And again, the big thing is when they give away an asset like that, they're not responsible for the taxes. And by giving it to charity, the charity then can turn around and sell it, and being a nonprofit, they're not paying income taxes. And back to the donor, they also get some sort of a tax deduction. And depending upon the asset that you give, the tax percentage the percentage of your adjusted gross income that you can use will vary.
Right.
And so they need to talk to their tax advisor about that. But more importantly is that it's another technique, like you say, that's more than just cash, and then they don't recognize the income.
Right. So a lot of different avenues. I like this whole discussion about possibly giving grain, because my wheels start to turn on, how that turns into current income for a farmer that sells it. So there might be some very interesting possibilities there. But I do know that we've got to take a break here coming up, and we just started in this important topic. It is about planned giving, and I want our listeners to really think today a little bit, when they say planned giving, there's going to be a number of people who say, well, that's not really for me. And there may be some surprises in terms of whether or not it is for you, because we're going to talk about required minimum distributions for retirees and some of the things that they can do. And in some cases, maybe they'll do it in lieu of that check or in addition to that check. So if you're starting to think, this sounds like for somebody who's got more money than I've got, you might be surprised. So hang on, we've got some good stuff coming up for you on Planned Giving today with Ron Lutz.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I'm Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell. Our guest for today, Ron Lutz, and we are talking about planned giving today, Scott.
Yeah, we are. We're talking about planned giving, and one of the things here at our next break, I'm going to make sure that people know the location of a couple of seminars that we've got coming up, so that if they want more information on retirement planning, which will, of course, will include part of planned giving, that will give that information. We also have a free offer coming up today, and I'm going to describe it a little bit later on, but it's a booklet called Charitable Optimization. And of course, anybody who missed last week and wants to get Managing Your Retirement Savings to Provide a Lifetime of Income, I'll make that one available today as well. And so we'll get into that in just a minute.
Sure.
But I've got Ron Lutz with me here today, and we're going to spend the majority of our time today talking about charitable gifts. But let's just take a moment before we get there and talk about the non-charitable and non-deductible gifts and some of the limitations. What are they, Ron, if you just walk us through that?
Well, I think, first of all, when you look at a gift that's non-charitable, non-deductible, it's really like one gift from an individual to another.
Right. And often from parents to children, but it can be, a lot of different things.
I'll accept money from anybody.
Yeah.
But the annually, an individual can give anyone up to $13,000 in value, whether it's cash, stock, any asset. And it's not a tax deduction for the donor.
Right.
But also at the same time, it's not taxable income to the recipient as well.
Right.
So that it's just a gift, as if you give your children birthday presents, your brothers, sisters, whatever. In addition to that, the federal estate tax is also set up that under today's law, you can give up to $5 million to, again, any individuals and not pay any federal estate federal estate taxes.
Right.
And so and now that one thing to keep in mind, that $5 million number is scheduled to sunset at the end of 2012.
And it was scheduled to sunset at the end of last year, but they kicked the can down the road, and so now we've got 2012, right?
Right. That's exactly right. So what will happen come January 1st, 2013? I wish we knew. It would make my job easier as I consult with reps such as yourself with Thrivent.
Right.
One thing, though, that is absolutely certain that hasn't changed, even through all these other federal estate tax law changes, has been Minnesota.
Right.
Minnesota still has a $1 million lifetime exemption.
Yep.
So even though someone may not be paying federal estate taxes, they may have to pay estate taxes to the state of Minnesota.
Right.
If they leave more than $1 million. So this idea of planning is really important, especially for Minnesota residents, because they could get caught paying some estate taxes they didn't think about.
Right, and you know what? It's easier to get to $1 million than you think about. So if you start taking a look at the value of your home, your retirement assets, whether it's a 401k or whatever, if you've inherited some money along the way, and all of a sudden, and you say, well, yeah, I'm at $1 million. But, there's two of us there, so if they're husband and wife, then you have to worry about the growth. And if you split the estate, there's a lot of times if you do it well, now no one does it to the last penny, but you can have past $2 million if, in fact, you split your estate between your wife and yourself so that you only, what passes through your estate is only, at $1 million. I say only, people are listening, only. Where's this guy from? But it's still, our farmers, I've got this dilemma because of the current price of farmland and the like, and they get well over that very, very quickly. So, okay, and then the link, Ron, to giving is that when they use more than that $13,000, because you can do $13,000 without having to file a gift tax return.
Correct, absolutely.
So then if they go over that, they have to file a gift tax return, but they can use up some of their estate exemption and still not pay any tax. But so let's say, for instance, I give $100,000 away. Well, the first $13,000 goes for free. The next, $87,000 then will go against my estate exemption, right?
Correct, right. Okay. Yeah, in fact, just one other note is that, interesting enough, unexpectedly, Congress last December allowed people to give up to $5 million in their lifetime. Well, up until then, we'd had, $3.5 million of estate tax exemption, but the gift limit was set at $1 million because of the sunset back to $1 million. Somewhere, Congress decided last year, and this caught everyone virtually by surprise in the industry, that they're going to say, okay, you can use up your $5 million of lifetime exemption in 2011 and 2012 total.
Right.
So yeah, that's exactly right. There would be no gift tax due.
Right. But then there could be. But then if you died and there was anything excess, then there's inheritance tax because you already used it up.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So when people are really thinking about giving to family members, or as you said, to anybody, what should they personally evaluate before making a gift?
First of all, they really need to sit down and make sure that they have enough for themselves. I mean, that is absolutely key, not only to live on, but also to handle unexpected events, things that come up, health care, long-term care issues. I mean, those are things that are somewhat unpredictable, but they need to make sure.
Right.
The other thing, Scott, and you've been in the industry 29 years. I'm starting my 26th year in the industry, and what I have found over and over is that people don't really take into account inflation and taxes into their retirement planning. They'll say, okay, I can live on X dollars, and lo and behold, it's virtually their Social Security and a pension and maybe some rental income or income from their investments. But so they're okay for the next few years.
Right.
But they get to 5 years down the road, and unfortunately, everything has gone up in price, and now they're saying, geez, I come up short every month. So that inflation issue is a big aspect that people really need to take into account.
Right, and the retirement planning systems that are out there today are so greatly improved that I so encourage people to make sure that whatever technique or system they're using is up to date. Because as you know, back in the 80s, people used these systems that were very Excel-based, from the software. Right. And they would have a conversation with their financial advisor that went something like this. The advisor would say, well, we're planning for your retirement here in the next 20 years. What should we put in for the average rate of return from your equity assets, equities being your growth assets? And the client would look back at them and give them sort of a puzzled look and usually say, well, you're the expert. What do you think? And the advisor often would say, well, they've been averaging, 8% or something like this. So why don't we be conservative and put in 7.5? Then the advisor would say, well, gosh, what would you like me to put into your plan for inflation? Again, the client gives a puzzled look and says, well, I don't know, it's been low, 2%. What do you think? And the advisor would say, well, let's, we've had some high inflation, some low inflation. Let's put in 3.5. So what they did is they projected, first of all, that there's steady growth in your investments, 7.5 after 7.5 after 7.5 every single year. There was no retraction. There was no negative numbers. And they also projected that inflation was always being beat by your investments in every single year. And the world does not work like that. So if our listeners have any kind of financial plan that is set out to help them for retirement, and they've got a plan that is that antiquated and that Pollyanna, where every single year your investments are beating inflation by a certain dollar amount, I urge you, listener, please call a financial professional and get a new plan with a new system because of the very thing that you're talking about. The new plans with the new systems really take into account so many other variables to give you a sense of probability. Okay, this doesn't sound like fun. Well, it does to me, but I'm sure our listeners are like, what? Seriously? But that's how, if you're saying, I don't know if I've got enough money to start giving. That's really the crux of the issue here, isn't it? One of the ways to do it is really run one of these probability scenarios that say, even if your worst case is we get high inflation with low kinds of investment returns, will I be okay? And if the environment, or the scenario, I should say, says you will, now you can start to give with what I would say some freedom, some sense of, I'm not going to be in trouble. So, right. At any rate, I just want people to know that there are systems out there that can update and shed light on their situation, unlike those systems of the past.
Yeah, one thing, Scott, working with reps across the country, and we really gets a really sampling. One of the things sometimes that we'll do is in these programs that you're talking about is we'll say to the rep, okay, the client talked about charitable giving, planned giving. Let's take the asset completely out of their portfolio and run the program and say,
without this, how do you do?
Exactly, and that really makes a big difference. And again, that confidence that they can give and saying, okay, I can live with this, and that's where you get to that area of surplus.
Right. I was running a program for someone who wanted to do, and I was trying to break it. I stress test every retirement plan that we do. And so when I say trying to break it, I said, okay, here's your expected amount of cash flow, the income from your pensions, your Social Security, your investments. And what I do is I start adding on $10,000 a year to see at what point in time does the system fall apart. Now, these clients were really in great financial shape because of many, many years of great planning and saving. And I got up to $40,000 a year extra before I started to get what I call the separation of the lines, where the system started to fail. Well, what that meant is we could go backwards and say, well, if it fails at $40,000, how do you guys feel about giving $10,000 a year away and just monitoring it year after year? They were absolutely delighted with that, like fantastic. And they actually, have started to do more than the 10,000 because of that. But your point is exactly right. Where's that point where the retirement system can't take it anymore, and then back it off to be that much more secure and that much more, in the range of predictability. So, okay. Let's try and get one more in before our next break here. As we're really looking at giving, let's talk a little bit about RMDs, required minimum distributions. This is something people get from their IRAs. People that are 70 and a half know what this is. Others, we're going to educate a little bit. Tell us about how that works in terms of the giving strategy.
Well, it's an interesting technique. It's called a qualified charitable distribution. And what it is that people who are 70 and a half and having to take required minimum distributions, RMDs, are able to actually take this qualified distribution and send it directly to a charity. It takes a few letters and forms, but more importantly is that as that money comes out of their IRA, and has to be an IRA account, it can't be any other qualified account, as it comes out of their IRA, that distribution to the charity actually qualifies as their RMD for the year, and the client does not have to report that as taxable income.
And this is another thing that got extended, didn't it? Because I know they first thought it was going to lapse or end at the end of 2010, but they extended it through 2011?
That is correct. And we don't know if it will be extended again. Congress has approved this about 3 or 4 other times, and they kind of do it late in the year.
Right.
So, yes, but we do have it available for 2011. So if people haven't taken an RMD this year and they don't want the taxable income, it might be a good strategy for them.
Well, we're going to come back in just a minute and talk more about the RMDs, but also some of the basic rules of charitable giving. here, Ron. So thanks for being on the show here with us. I think this is really, really great content. And our retired listeners that are 70 and a half years old, you're going to want to hear a little bit more about these, the RMDs and some steps you might actually want to take before December 31st of this year. Okay.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Kyle Zander, Scott Wardell with you as always. Our guest for today, Ron Lutz. But Scott, before we get back into the program, how about we go through our deal of the day for
Absolutely.
today?
Yeah. Today, because we are talking about charitable giving, the deal of the day is a little booklet called Charitable Optimization. It's a good little booklet, and it really talks about not only some of the avenues of giving to charities, but also something called wealth replacement. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today with Ron here. How do you actually replace the wealth that you're giving away so that your family members don't end up with less? You'd say, well, how can that be? If I give it away, can my family members still get the same dollar amount? Well, through some of the tax treatment of both the deductions and giving to whether it's family members or whatever, there are ways to get pretty darn close, if not actually the same amount to your heirs and give to the charity. So hang on for that one. That's a good one coming up. But the booklet is called Charitable Optimization. And here, folks, if you're near someplace where you can write this number down, it's a toll-free number. All you have to do is call this number, and we'll send this booklet out to you. Obviously, you have to leave us your name and your address so that we have a place to send it. And I encourage you to also leave us your phone number because I would say almost once a week we have to actually call to get clarification on a particular address because it just didn't come, somebody said it too fast or whatever. But the booklet is Charitable Optimization. They call 1-855-346-4332 to get the book Charitable Optimization, or they can get last week's offer, which is Managing Your Retirement Savings to Provide a Lifetime of Income. So please let us know which of the two booklets that you want, or if you say send me both, we'll be happy to send both of these little booklets or brochures out to you to help you provide some more information. And the other thing that I want to mention at this time, I'm going to mention at the end of the show, is that if people want to come to one of our seminars, they can go to Thrivent.com, find an event. So we've got events going all over Minnesota. So, we've got listeners in Montevideo, Thief River Falls, Morris, Hutchinson, Wilmer, New Ulm, New Prague, Montgomery, and many, many other areas. And so wherever you are within listening of this show, you are probably within a distance of an event sponsored by Thrivent. So go to Thrivent.com, find an event, and there might be one coming up nearby you. I personally have one going on Tuesday the 8th, which is this coming Tuesday, and it is in Eden Prairie for our listeners in the Twin Cities area, and it is at the Hilton Garden Inn. And so the way for people to register, guess what, is to go to Thrivent.com, find an event, and you can register right online. If you're not able to register online, you can give a call to that same number, 1-855-346-4332, and tell us that you'd like to attend that particular seminar. But we've got Ron Lutz with us today, and we're talking about charitable giving. Before the break, we were talking about RMDs, required minimum distributions, and we really didn't get as deep into it as we'd like to, Ron. So tell us a little bit more about required minimum distributions and how that links to charitable giving.
Yeah, again, well, your required minimum distribution is required from any qualified account that you have been deducting throughout your lifetime. And when you hit 70 and a half, the IRS says that you need to start taking money out of the account. The IRS finally wants to get their money from that account. You've been deducting it. It's growing tax deferred.
And so which account, I'm going to interrupt you here, which account don't you have to do that with?
A Roth IRA. I like Roth IRAs.
Yeah, you don't have to take it out, and if you do, you don't have to pay any tax on it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I sorry to interrupt you there, but that's one of the things that where people go through the conversion of regular IRAs to Roth because they really like that tax-free status.
And it grows tax deferred as well. So
Absolutely.
You pay the tax going in, and it doesn't get taxed while it's growing or when it comes out. But again, on accounts that have RMDs at 70 and a half, they have to start taking it out. And so Congress has allowed individuals who have these RMDs required from their IRA accounts, individual retirement accounts, that they can actually send this qualified distribution directly to the charity. And it's not income taxable to the individual, and it does qualify as their RMD for that particular year.
Right.
One thing is that it has been extended through December 31st, 2011. We don't know what Congress is going to do for 12.
Right.
They have not passed the law. So if anyone is looking to do this and they haven't taken their RMD, or even if they have taken a distribution this year, but they're saying, hey, I plan to give a dollar amount to my favorite charity, this is a great place for them to take money out because then it will reduce their balance and it will reduce the amount of RMD for next year that they don't have to take out.
We always encourage people to consult with their tax advisor on these particular issues, but this can be a big deal for a lot of people, especially if someone is not currently itemizing their deductions and they're taking the standard deduction, and this will actually increase the overall, or it will reduce their taxable income by having that RMD go direct. So there's a category of people this is really, really helpful for.
Yeah, we do a lot of analysis with people and their deductions because we do try to maximize the deductibility and maximize their income. And it's just amazing how many people have distributions from their IRAs, and they'll list that they gave X number of dollars to charity, but they can't deduct it because they're doing the standardized deduction.
Exactly.
The other thing, Scott, is when people have to take their RMDs, that also potentially increases their overall income. And for people who are 70 and a half, they're typically drawing Social Security. And that could lead to a negative impact on their Social Security benefits and creating a taxation of their Social Security benefits, which this qualified charitable distribution is one way to avoid having that distribution counted as taxable income for them.
Right. And so if you're listening and you're saying, gosh, this sounds really complicated, this is where you need a partner to help you through. This is where a qualified financial professional, along with your tax accountant, works as a team to help you through these very, very issues. And the people that do their homework and make the phone call are the ones that can really take advantage of situations like this where other people say, well, I wish I'd known about that, or, yeah, I heard about it, but I didn't do anything about it. Because this could be a situation where many people could take advantage of it who are not.
Absolutely, yeah. We've had many people do it over the last several years, and again, it can be virtually any charity. It doesn't have to be your church. It doesn't have to be local.
Right. Although it can be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right. The key is it has to be a legitimate 501c3, a non-profit
tax-exempt organization.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Ron, let's give our listeners the basic rules to charitable giving. So, we started with non-charitable gifts in the $13,000. What are the rules for charitable giving?
Charitable giving is, again, people can give any amount of money that they want to a charity in any year. But as far as when they look at their taxes, in general, if you give a gift of cash, the individual can deduct up to 50% of their adjusted gross income. So hypothetically, if someone made $40,000, they could give a cash gift up to $20,000 and reduce that taxable income by that amount.
Right, but you said adjusted gross. So when people say this is what I made, often their adjusted gross is different than what they think about in terms of income from employment and other things. So they have to there's a little calculation there to get to the adjusted
exactly,
gross.
And that's, again, why people need to sit down with their professional tax advisor and financial planner just to know what that amount is. And then the other thing is that, again, we talked earlier in the show about giving a hard asset, land, stock. Again, there's several different rules in place, but in general, if someone would gift an appreciated asset to a charity, they can deduct 30% of their adjusted gross income. So they're based upon that, again, the appreciated asset, they haven't paid some income taxes on it, so that the IRS doesn't give them as big of a deduction as if they just gave cash.
Right, and if they do the combination, they can give the appreciated asset and take 30%, and they give cash on top of that to get themselves up to the 50. It doesn't limit them, but they can put things in combination to do that. So
absolutely,
yeah,
right.
There's a lot of ways if people want to start doing that kind of gifting, that it is available to them. So Ron, often people use life insurance as a possible way to help a charity or a family member, and they have been encouraged, and a lot of charities have said, well, just name us as a 10% of your life insurance proceeds. And so there's different things out there relative to giving life insurance. So walk us through how life insurance can work, and maybe a little bit of the limitations of using life insurance for charities.
Right. Well, life insurance, I've been in the business for 25 years, and I'm a big proponent of it, and it can be a way of leveraging the assets that people have to give to their family, and of course, younger families, it provides protection. But also, more importantly for charity, is that, as you said, we have many people who will name the charity as a percentage owner of their life insurance contract. But what we also do when we get into this planned giving is that we actually have people who will name the charity as the owner and beneficiary of that life insurance contract.
Sure.
And when in that process, when that's done, what that allows us to do is, allows the donor to do is potentially deduct that premium as a cash gift.
So on an annual basis, they might be able to take a donation for a premium made to a life insurance contract.
Yeah, it depends on how they pay the premium and who owns it and things like that. But yeah, it's a good way. And what happens now is that people who do this often are thinking from the standpoint, while I'm living, I'm giving this charity X number of dollars for a year, but when I pass away, is that gift can perpetuate itself and,
sure.
and continue even after they're no longer able to do that personally.
Right, exactly. And we're going to hopefully get to talk a little bit about, use of life insurance for wealth replacement as well, because of course, we're in a situation where whenever anything goes to a charity, and life insurance is typically a tax-exempt when the proceeds go, and I mean income tax, not estate tax, because people confuse that all the time. Right. And so, you really have to make a decision between your overall holdings as to what is, in fact, the best thing that might go to that charity. But for this moment, let's talk about people have built up, pretty good amount of their savings in tax-deferred status. A lot of people have, whether it's a 401k or whatever it is, and oftentimes, their kids are in a higher tax bracket now than they are. So I always say in the beginning of retirement, they always are worried about, themselves and how long their money lasts, and later they start to worry about the next generation and this wealth transfer. So give us just a couple seconds. We'll take a break and we'll come back to this. What do you do when your kids are in a higher tax bracket than you are, and you've got all this tax-deferred stuff going on in your portfolio?
Yeah, it happens every day that we talk to reps across the country that mom and dad are looking to give the kids an asset, and again, they've built up an IRA or a non-qualified annuity, and lo and behold, they're in a lower tax bracket than their children. Right. And so it's just as crazy how they don't want to pay the income taxes, but when you start to talk about tax efficiency and who really should pay that tax, in a lot of instances, it actually is mom and dad who are better off paying the tax than the children.
Absolutely. It gets a little complicated at this point in time, but this is, again, one other great reason why people should sit down with a financial professional and get this advice. We've got a lot more coming up here, and we're going to be talking about giving gifts to charity and something that's called wealth replacement. How do I make sure that, the kids are taken care of once you start giving some of the retirement assets away? So people stay tuned here because we've got a lot more to come on our topic today of planned giving with Ron Lutz.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Kyle Zander with you. Scott Wardell, as always, and our guest for this week, Ron Lutz. We were talking about planned giving today,
yep.
Scott.
We've been talking about planned giving, and the offer of the day is a booklet called Charitable Optimization. So if you didn't get that number in the first half, here it is. Call this number, and we'll send this out to you. Give us your name and your address, and we'll put it in the mail within the first 2 days of next week. It is 1-855. It's a toll-free number. 1-855-346-4332, and it is called Charitable Optimization. And if you want last week's offer, which is managing your retirement savings to provide a lifetime of income, we'll send that out to you as well. Also, one more mention, if you are interested in getting more information and education on this, come to one of our events. Go to thrivent.com and just type in Find an Event, and it's going to list the events based on the state, based on your zip code, and you can see if there's something nearby. I've got one coming up on November the 8th. That's this coming Tuesday at the Hilton Garden Inn, but you have to have a reservation, so call that same number and get a reservation, or reserve your place at thrivent.com, find an event. I've got Ron Lutz with me here today, and we were talking about this dilemma. Oh, by the way, if anybody wants to call, Kyle, today?
Yeah, if anybody wants to call on the range of topics that we've been talking about today, any questions for Scott Wardell or our guest, Ron Lutz, you can give us a call at 952-758-2571. That phone number one more time, 952-758-2571, if you'd like to ask a question to either Scott Wardell or our guest, Ron Lutz, about any of the topics that we've discussed today on the show.
We'd be delighted to take those calls. So, Ron, let's get back into this dilemma that we were just talking about, where you've built up a pretty good amount of savings. It's tax deferred, and you look out to your kids and you find out, gosh, I think I might be in a lower tax bracket than 2 of my 3 kids, or whatever that situation is, and then you start to worry about, wow, what happens when they get it?
Right. Yeah. So many times I talk to reps across the country, and I do consulting with reps as they're building their cases, and they'll say, hey, mom and dad would want to leave this asset, this annuity, this IRA to the children. And my first question oftentimes is, Scott, tell me about their children.
Right.
And they'll say, well, one's a doctor, one's a dentist, and one owns his own business. I'm like, so they're probably in a higher tax bracket than mom and dad. And they'll say, yeah, they most likely are. And so what happens now is you have some tax inefficiencies.
Right.
And where mom and dad, who are in a lower tax bracket than their children, are deferring income from their assets and the growth.
And the idea is never to defer it from a low bracket to a high bracket. The idea is the opposite.
Absolutely.
So it probably worked. The strategy worked while they were working because they were in a higher tax bracket. They took the deduction. Now they deferred it to this time, but the money's lasting, through their retirement. So it's a different view.
Absolutely. And Scott, the other thing is that we can't predict where income tax rates are going to go.
Right.
But when you talk to a lot of people, there are a number of the general feeling is that tax rates are going to go up. And so therefore we do have that need to get the money out of the current asset and into something else that's going to be more efficient for passing on to the beneficiaries.
Yep.
And so actually a lot of times we'll talk about using life insurance and funding that, using that asset to fund a life insurance premium on mom and dad, which you've already mentioned, passes to the children income tax free.
Very good. And we've got a caller in. Jeannie is on line one. Let's take Jeannie's question if we can.
Jeannie, go ahead.
Can you tell us your question?
Looks like we lost Jeannie.
Oh, sorry about that.
Well, Jeannie, we certainly would encourage you to call back here, 952-758-2571. We encourage anybody, if you've got a question for either Scott Wardell or Ron Lutz on the topics that we've discussed today on financial strategy with Scott Wardell, 952-758-2571. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, and so, Ron, let's jump ahead. I told folks we're going to talk about this whole concept of wealth replacement. If a person wants to make a large gift to a charity, how can they replace that value for their children? So, because that's the most common question I run into is they have good charitable intent, but they're like, yeah, but I don't want my kids to get less either. How do they do this, Ron?
Wealth replacement is a technique that is very commonly put in place with charitable giving. And basically what it is, Scott, is that we actually put a life insurance policy in place equal or sometimes greater or near the amount of the asset that the children would have inherited. So if there's some land that the parents want to give and they want to get it to the charity, but they want that same dollar amount to go to the children, they'll say, hey, let's we have enough assets here. We're gonna purchase this life insurance policy, and now at the time of their death, the children inherit the life insurance and the cash rather than the land.
Right.
And for the children, sometimes it's easier, especially if you have multiple children. It's certainly easier to divide cash sometimes than a plot of land.
Well, and if people are looking at their overall portfolio and their investments and their financial plan, and they've got these qualified assets, as we were talking about before, knowing that the kids would pay tax on those qualified assets, and that life insurance typically goes to the kids completely tax-free, you can also use it in that situation, right?
Absolutely. We're talking many times to individuals is that if the individual leaves their IRA or these taxable assets to a charity, again, the charity, when they receive it and they dispose of them and turn them into cash, don't pay any sort of income taxes. Where mom and dad then, again, they don't want to leave the kids out. They could use the income from that asset to replace it and buy a life insurance policy for themselves, again, in the same amount that they gave to the charity.
Right. Very, very good.
Well, how does that tie into a person's overall estate plan?
Well, I'm going to grab that one, Kyle. One of the things is that gifting is often used as a technique to actually reduce the size of the estate. So that when people are looking at it and they're saying, gosh, let's say you're, as an example, and it doesn't have to be this, but let's say that you're bumping up against that $1 million a piece, and you're like, gosh, what are we going to do? We've got to move some money out of the estate now before it appreciates any further. So that's often the technique that is used, and it can be, that through that limitation of the $13,000, then to family members or other individuals, or they can start to make some charitable gifts. But charitable gifts, of course, are deductible to the estate as well. So the charitable gifts and transferring to the charity are less of an issue to reduce the size of estate, because you can actually do that through the estate at the time of death. And of course, we talked just a little bit about wealth replacement and how it works into their overall plan. And again, that's important because as you're talking about maybe having life insurance proceeds being paid to the kids, then we've got to walk this delicate line to make sure that we don't put that life insurance necessarily. It might be held inside the estate by the owners, but often we'll transfer that to a different ownership. Maybe the kids are going to own that life insurance contract so that you reduce, because if you put a big life insurance contract inside the estate, now you're back up to a large estate, because although life insurance is typically income tax free when the proceeds are paid, it is not free of estate tax relative to the overall size of the estate. Ron, any comments on that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a great line. We have to walk the fine line. But so a lot of times either the children own it, or a lot of times just because of parents wanting to as we call, manage it from the grave. They'll put it into a trust.
Yep.
And that way the trust has some stipulations as far as how quickly that money could be dispersed to the children.
Ron, I know we're running out of time here today, but I want to make sure we talk about common mistakes. What would you say are the most common mistakes people make when they're putting together a gifting strategy?
I think the biggest thing, Scott, is that they don't put it in as a comprehensive plan. Plan giving is more of a knee-jerk reaction. And so if we can get people to do plan giving as a strategy, as a part of their whole estate plan, it really helps. The other thing is not building enough flexibility. We build programs. People say I'm going to do this and I'm not going to listen to anything else, or they just kind of get on a one-track mind and they don't look at all their different options. And so I'd really encourage people to, when they do this, to have an open mind
and do their homework.
Absolutely,
because this is an area where people are typically not very well versed, and oftentimes they think it's not for them, it's for somebody else. Would you agree?
Yeah, very much so. And they just sometimes, I think it's this whole idea, or older individuals are much more close to the vest on their assets, and they also sometimes don't want their children to know how much they're going to potentially inherit, because their children might feel like they're ready to want mom and dad to pass away. And I hate to say that, but I don't think that's the case. But I think the biggest thing is also communication to the children. So mom and dad share with the kids what's going to happen,
right,
and what their intention are, so that the children can also be a part of it and make sure that the plan is executed the way that mom and dad intended.
Fantastic. Ron, thanks for being on the show here today. Really appreciate it.
Scott, what's on tap for next week?
Next week, I have Jerry J.J. Johnson talking about the tax triangle. This is really for everyone in terms of how you can, in fact, balance out your investments overall into the three categories of taxation. So it's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to it. And again, one more time, if people want to get today's brochure, they can call this number, 1-855-346-4332, to get the brochure, Charitable Optimization or Managing Your Retirement, to provide a lifetime of income. And Ron, thank you so much for being with us here today. Really appreciate all your expertise and experience.
You've been listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.